Hello everyone, welcome to Very Creative Friday here at HiveMind Press virtual office. Again, just reminding that this space is like a virtual brick and mortar office. So imagine you're just like wandering through the internet and you stumble across this page. Come in, talk about your projects, talk about creativity. We'll be going through some techniques, some things about the industry, some things that can help you, but mainly just connecting on a Friday morning. Doing little mini workshops, you can contribute, jump in, talk about your stuff, enjoy coffee. Wherever you're joining us from, I hope you've written something today. I hope you have something planned to write, even small, a paragraph, a page. Just progress, get something down, even if it's ideas about what to write in the future. A future session, maybe planning that, just dot points, just keep writing, keep engaging every single day. Quite a chilly morning in Perth, so I'm using the cradling the coffee to get my hands nice and warm. We can talk about a few different things today. We're going to go through some of the structures of plot and a little bit in character development, so how to maintain a bit of an organic evolution in character development, I guess surrendering to that process of letting your characters become more individual, more unique, and less so heavily structured. I think they talked about that a little bit last time as well. And in between, probably not this early because we don't have any viewers, but we'll have some interactions. That's what's scheduled anyway, so hopefully as we get more momentum, we'll have more time for those sections as well, which is really where the good stuff will come from, helping others, and less of this structured delivery, even though it's pretty good content. We'll talk about some editing as well. I have my first creator meeting in about 45 minutes. So until then, the office is all ours, just ours. I'll bring this guy more into frame. Very fitting for the Friday. Get you through whenever you're going through. There we go. That's better. Bam. So there's different types of plot structures, of course, and the most common ones, I guess, that we'll talk about today are the 3-act structure, the hero's journey, and just non-linear stories, and how they each maintain the continuity needed for the reader's understanding, and also that progression towards their resolution and greater understanding of the conflict they've presented. Personally, I prefer non-linear stories, but obviously the 3-act is probably still utilized in terms of how we prefer to deal with resolutions, and we see this best applied in trilogies. The 3-act process isn't even applied within the work itself. It's becoming, or not even becoming, more and more popular. It's been something since the Greek tradition of the trilogy, but the audience really enjoy that setup of the main world and the normalcy of the world. The conflict destroys that world, and then the rest of the process in movies 2 and 3 is often overcoming that. So we'll talk about the 3-act structure first, then the hero's journey, and then non-linear from there. So the hero's journey, the 3-act structure, it does exactly that. It sets up a universe, a sense of normalcy, a sense of typical characters and what they experience. And we're often, it's often can be a cast out of Eden experience with the 3-act structure, where there is a perfect world, something interrupts that perfect world, and then the rest of the story is trying to return to the perfect world, but with development and greater understandings that the challenges have presented those characters. So that's the type of cyclical way that the story is trying to play out. Setting this up in my mind can be, if not done appropriately, a little bit too rigid. We can find that writers can lean too heavily on stereotypes or generalizations to quickly create this world that is perhaps too idyllic. And this is again in an amateur type of independent way, but just without cooking it fully, developing maybe. The suggestion here would be to do a pre-story to the point that your story starts, so that you can have at least a better understanding of the pre-context and pre-history of the world that led up to that point. I think that's an effective way to do the 3-act, because it gives a greater sense of authenticity to the environment. It gives a greater sense that we are arriving to an established place, that this place isn't type of forming in our vision as we're walking through it, as the writer is writing as well. And that's where, if it's not done properly enough, it can feel like a second or third draft still, where the author is maybe explaining it to themselves. The confrontation then comes when, and the most generalized is the antagonist arrives, so someone resembling maybe polar opposite attributes of the protagonist, and disrupts the world with conflict and still causes mayhem, puts obstacles up, tries to disrupt the status quo, but by doing so reveals in that chaos different elements and different challenges and different resolutions as well. And within the characters almost is that this is where, and we'll talk about this in a second, I guess, with character sheet development, but you want your characters to be reacting in this confrontation element as each one of their attributes would be confronted if they were subverted. And this is like going back to, I really prefer that organic development where you have a dramatic irony within the character of their childhood actually does exist, and it has informed their decisions today, as opposed to a single sentence on a character sheet that defines almost their formulaic reaction to every situation. This confrontation period is meant to disrupt that in a micro way in your story, so that it reflects in a macro way of the themes that you're presenting as well. And that by finding the resolution in each one of these characters, you reflect that resolution back into your theme as well. This goes back to what we talked about last time, where it's imperative to create relationship with your readers, and your readers identify with characters. So it's important as well to have a diverse and broad range of characters, so that you can play with the interactions of the theme on each different context of the character, which represents a different cultural context, which by reflection represents a different cohort of individuals. Excuse me. And by doing that, by showing that confrontation from the perfectly established world, which you could argue that maybe a lot of readers, that's their perception of their world and their understanding, that the knowledge they have is true, that it's the authority, this is the correct way to view the world. And it can be common as well for people not to openly challenge that. So even having it challenged in a creative way, in a safe space, I think is probably the best way to do it. But anyway, you're trying to elicit that same confrontation within the reader, in the characters. We have to really bring it back to that core point. We're not really letting characters interact for the characters' benefit. They don't really exist. What we're trying to do is let the characters interact with the confrontation and the overall theme, so that we can elicit a response and engagement from the reader. By doing that, I think that then it's important to have that the potential, I guess, for someone to act completely outside of their character sheet. Again, I keep saying character sheet like I'm a fan of it, but I'm really not. But that's also possible within humanity, is that people can have a situation happen to them that just changes their thinking altogether. I want to say chemistry, but I know nothing about the biology of it. I've experienced it myself, and I'm pretty sure it's a common experience. And we're trying to allow that humanity in our characters. We're trying to let the structure of this plot be a guidance through that. And ultimately, and this is where we arrive at the resolution, we're trying with the 3-act structure to show that even through decimation, or even through this confrontation, that there is a chance of healing and overcoming. And of course, I think this relates to the hero's journey as well. But we arrive at the resolution of the 3-act structure, and you're really trying to re-establish the environment of the first act. You're trying to get back to that environment of perfection, however, with a renewed sense of identity, renewed sense of self. The Lion King is a 3-act. Could also probably hero's journey. However, the 3-act structure does present itself with his childhood, and there's a very distinct identity, and of course that abrupt change into adolescence when he's cast out of the community and loses his patriarchal figure. And then the final phase, the resolution is he returns to community to restore harmony, but with a very renewed and stronger self. It's still Simba, but obviously it's not Simba at all. This is the nature of the 3-act story. Obviously there's similarities to the hero's journey because he's the hero, but it's not particularly what we'll focus on in that regard. I like the 3-act structure. I like it applied to story, and I really like it applied to trilogy. When we see it applied to trilogy, I like it particularly, and I'll put it plainly, because you think it resolves in the first movie, and then you realize there's a larger villain at play. And all the perception is built around that the villain from the first one, or the main threat from the first act in this larger trilogy, I guess, is the most violent, the most treacherous, the hardest to overcome. And then it turns out that that is more just like a lackey for the real villain, or the real obstacle, or the real challenge. I like that structure, and I think that a lot of people do, and I think Hollywood does, because it's very marketable. And I think that, if we can maybe take a tangent for a second, I think that it gets exploited when we do the third movie as 2 parts, as becoming quite common. But you can think that you've immediately doubled revenue and turnover, and this is where we start to get compromised, I think, with commercial thinking and creativity. But the trilogy is really impactful, and I think that it has been for many, many years, thousands of years. So something obviously quite natural with the 3-act structure that resonates with readers, or just resonates with people seeking entertainment, I guess. I think it's because there's a general relationship to having an understanding of life and truth and understanding, and having something completely left field, or even something close to you, subvert that, challenge that, and then the process to overcome as well, and re-establish a norm with a new understanding and a new developed sense of self, I guess, as well. So the hero's journey, let's talk about I guess Lord of the Rings. I like Lord of the Rings, and that makes me unique. No. The hero's journey is the process of a protagonist actively seeking out change from their environment. So the protagonist is going to themselves. If we can maybe transition from the 3-act structure, they're going to create the confrontation, they're going to create the obstacles, they're going to create the change needed to confront their world. If we can stick with talking about The Hobbit for I guess The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings have similar heroes' journeys, where the Shire is fantastic, really great place. Everything's good. Why would you really seek anything else? The idea is that we get restless with contentedness, and that everything is great. We strive for contentedness, or to be content, and then when we achieve it, we are restless. This is a generalization, probably how I feel a little bit as well, so I can speak from that. And the call to adventure obviously being the burden, I guess, for the responsibility to take the ring and destroy it. And across the way we face trials that in themselves are micro confrontations and challenges of big, bad, scary things, often analogized from the woods. The woods has been used in literature to kind of as a sense of border control, really, but also as a way to present things beyond our knowing that are quite frightening. And by doing that, we're able to really play on the audience's imagination. Really, you got to think that there's a innate terror of the dark, and that the best thing that we can do is actually let people figure out their own challenges and villains, I guess. Again, on a tangent, we look at Psycho. Psycho is one of the best horror movies because it implies violence, and if we can imply violence, if we can imply characteristics that somehow relate to even more shocking elements from the reader's context, we elicit a greater reaction. And what I mean is that my idea of if we take the shower scene in Psycho, my idea of that scene may be drastically different to what you are reading, what you are viewing, but both of them will be at the same threshold of our tolerance of fear, and that's really important. Really important to use, not just for fear. Let's bring it back down, but the same thing for fatherly figures, brotherly figures, sisterly figures. You can elicit some type of reaction, interaction, maybe is a better word, of the characters that emulates a characteristic of someone close to the reader. Now, in the hero's journey, these trials are presented periodically and often get worse and seem otherworldly, and that's really important. I think it's really important because it reveals to the reader and the protagonist actually that contentedness had been established to escape these things, and that these things had always been there and always would be there. But there's a type of cyclical irony, but the people are unable to, the characters are unable to develop the skill set necessary to overcome these horrors unless they face the horrors. And I think that's also resonates with readers, because that's very much what we're faced with in life, is that we pick a pursuit, we pick a passion, and we pick a journey, and along the way we are confronted with trials. We adopt different strategies to those trials. Oftentimes it's an examination, and then we learn from the exam, as opposed to our education, which teaches us to prepare, and then the examination comes. There's crisis, there's treasure, there's reward, there's development, there's relationship. There's a whole bunch of great things, and I think that's why it resonates so well as a plot structure, because people identify with that as, I mean, we're all the hero in our own story, really, and then that's offset with no one's the villain in their own story, and I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as well. But ultimately, we always have resolution. That's the point of plot, is to arrive people at a sense of comfort and, I'll say normalcy again, but we'll just say like a platform, a sense of stability and understanding, so that they can leave the story not feeling like, what was that? I've heard it in one of my classes, talked about, like, you want to start with the characters that you plan to finish with, and I don't, maybe that's breaking it down. It was some years ago, but essentially saying the psychology of the reader really enjoys seeing if we have character A and B at the start. Maybe they're enjoying a cup of tea, smoking a pipe out front of the house. The psychology of the reader really enjoys and walks away feeling really good and resolved when, no matter what they've gone through, we're able to tie up a lot of the loose ends, and we have them, the end scene is again those two characters having a cup of tea, smoking a pipe outside the house. Again, we're thinking about The Hobbit. It just creates that true sense of, I want to say cyclical, but it's just like a circle in this regard. It's a circle, and if you take that circle, turn it sideways, and then add time, it becomes a spiral like that. And that's when we talk about cyclical nature of character development. That each story in itself has that resolution, but it's not adding time as that fourth dimension. So the hero's journey covers a lot of that, and I think that's why people resonate with it. It's important to choose those trials very specifically. It's important to have the intended outcome, and I mean this in a sense of you've let it organically happen, and then you have a firm understanding of it before you write the trial of what you want that character to experience. If you're in a party, a larger party, like a D&D method it can be helpful sometimes, where you're rolling dice for chances and reactions based on the information you've set for the characters. That can be helpful because, again, I go back to the element of humanity. The element of humanity in plot is that life isn't like this either. It doesn't go to plan. We fail the trials. We fail the conflicts. And we have to adjust. And I think that it's important to add that element into story as well. And I don't think that I don't think it can be natural for writers to type of sabotage characters, because it has to, on a larger scale, it has to admit that within the writer themselves there's an element of sabotage. I can probably say that with confidence. and then recognize that and put that in my characters. That's fine. But it is a challenging process to come to, but realizing humanity in plot is really important because, again, think about stories you've read that were just great plot, I guess, in terms of theoretically, but the interactions, they were maybe predictable. The outcomes you could foresee. The element of someone dealing with a panic situation that just makes them recluse for the rest of the story. And then maybe later we find out why they had such a significant reaction, and you can use that element to talk about larger concepts of mental health and how it's maybe people don't have the faculties to deal with everything. That's just one element, and that's again, top of my head type stuff, but I would encourage humanity in plots. And then non-linear narratives, I like non-linear the most. Non-linear lets the reader kind of make assumptions, and then you can purposefully, with non-linear stories, smash those assumptions, and you can use it as a technique to reveal the processes that we form knowledge. I think that's important, and expose how fickle they can be if used and abused correctly. Non-linear, of course, so non-linear story. The best non-linear story I've ever read is Green Grass Running Water by Thomas Green, and it's a fantastic story that starts off in a time, in a space outside of time, and it's 4 figures. In this instance, they are manifesting as elders, and they can see over time and space. I love that concept. I love that concept because it reveals the larger cyclical nature that I discussed when we take a circle, spin it, and add time. And we keep coming back to points, but at different time. They can arrive at situations with an understanding that makes the situation absurd in the present understanding. And you can think of this immediately if you were to be thrown back into the 17th century with the current understanding, the current epistemology, the current limits of knowledge we have now. There would be a lot that you could point out. And so there's this element as well, but with modern episodes, and that these figures are all seeing, all knowing, but they expose the ridiculousness of these figures, and that's probably a tangent topic of the type of not alien narrator, but like an outsider narrator, can be quite helpful. We'll stick to non-linear narratives at the moment. One of the greatest non-linear narratives, and maybe it's not non-linear because it's kind of in reverse, is Memento. Memento plays with this because we the audience and the readers, I guess, are exposed to a set understanding that is continually challenged or even subverted, I guess, based on the scene that we see that comes next. It's a character that has forgotten his memory. I'm going to do a horrible job of paraphrasing the film, and keeps finding clues about I think it's who murdered his wife. I'm not sure, but there's something significant. The story structure itself is really interesting because we're able to continually play with the audience's perception of whether this guy is actually a good guy, a bad guy, the unreliable narrator, and the unreliable perspective of it all leaves us feeling quite disoriented, which I think is the prime time to reveal deeper things within the audience, like what are they just taking for assumptions outside of this film? What are they just seeing? Little clips in the news, little gossips of conversation, and extrapolating large assessments of people or other issues without really seeing the piece that came before, the piece that might come after. This might just be the end piece. This could be the middle, who knows? In the nature of that cyclical spiral, there's really no sense of space or order. It just all is. But it's important to have that understanding as well, and non-linear narratives generally don't provide that until the very end. If we were to write the story in a linear fashion and we then we wrote 26 chapters, we labeled those chapters A through Z. A non-linear narrative isn't as simple as leaving A, leaving Z, and scrambling all the rest. But we still have to provide the resolution. We still have to take the reader on a journey. And if we can have another tangent quickly, I often think about like being in a conversation, in a party, whatever. You aren't really engaged in conversations that are just talking at you to talk. And we don't want to write at people just to be writing. We want to be taking them on that journey. We want to be encouraging them to engage, to think critically, on a level, maybe not academically, but think on a sense of like just challenging their own understandings, not in an overt way, but just at the end of reading that I go, I never thought of it like that. That's really what we're trying to do with non-linear narratives. I like, because they, and I've seen them used very effectively, set up perception and then smash it. But again, they have to have a sense of they have to establish a beginning. You can do this with the end and then do the classic how did we get here. So you show the person floating in a pool, black and white, zooming out, and then we spend the whole movie pursuing that story and how that person ended up in that situation. That can be effective. It is good for tension. It gives the people, the readers or viewers, a sense of anticipation, because there's something within them that they know what happened, right? They saw the outcome. They know what's happened, but that's not really good enough. They want to see what led to that, what caused it, the conflicts that weren't resolved effectively, I guess, that led to that in this particular movie anyway, Hollywood Boulevard. That's the enticing nature. Maybe it's not Hollywood Boulevard, sorry. Someone will correct me, I'm sure. But that classic, just the first thing that came to me from non-linear was that then you can lean on that tension and suspense, anticipation, to have the readers engaged throughout the whole thing, and you could be establishing a very clear suspect, a very clear killer, and then resolve the situation in a gambit and completely take the readers in a different way. Readers like that. Readers really like that stuff. All these plot structures really are about challenging and confronting the reader or viewer in a way that is safe, that they're not doing it out in the street or on social media, that they're doing it in the safety of a book. I would like to think, maybe naively, that people do want that. They want to broaden their understandings. Maybe people think that, but don't go and overtly seek to engage with other cultures, other people outside of their friends groups, and that's, it's tough, but they still want to experience these things and these challenges and these plots. what I'm trying to say is that all the plots have to be, the plot itself has to be like in a capsule. The plot is so important because the tighter your plot, the more creative freedom you have with other elements, is that you can be more creatively experimental with prose or dialogue, presentation, tone, all these things within the writing itself, if you can maintain the reader's focus throughout with a strong plot. That's why the non-linear is so I go back to the ordering, I guess, of the non-linear. We can't just scramble the chapters in between. There has to be a firm sense of beginning, a firm sense of challenge and dismay, and then a firm resolution at the other end. Now, it doesn't have to be, obviously. You can be that maybe art house experimental, go the other way, and you want your audience to be leaving like that. Shakespeare would do that with his villains. He wouldn't resolve them as a type of punishment, I guess, commitment, but also that everyone else would be resolved. My point is, going back to the plots are designed to hold the audience's hand, the reader's hand. If we are erratic with the plot intentionally, we generally have to make up for it in other areas with intense formality, because that is what the readers are looking for. They're looking to be challenged within the limits of their understanding, and that's quite a contradictory phrase, because we're trying to push people beyond their understanding, but we have to do it in a way within the tools at their disposal. It would be inappropriate to thrust a non-linear story that had very erratic characterizations, and you also chose to surrender punctuation as a maybe comment to the larger institutions, or a rebel without a cause. If you expose too many of these things, you actually lose your reader. And going back to our initial point that we made today and last time as well, was that's the whole intention that we're here for, is to communicate things to the reader. It's all good to be experimental and creative if we can share it with people. Otherwise, Peter Jeffrey, the godfather of poetry in Western Australia, says to me, you may as well be screaming into an empty room. And that's very true. I find sometimes my poetry is just like that, though. I just scream into an empty room, but not my short stories or longer stories. I hope people don't read it and sound like I'm screaming into an empty room. That's my notes on plot. I have my first creator meeting to go to. In these creator meetings, I have the remarkable privilege of speaking with creators from all over the world, and helping them develop their story, helping them maintain consistency in that development. Development is such a important, integral, and extended part of the creative practice. And yeah, I'm really lucky to go and spend my mornings doing that. So we'll be back on regularly, as regularly as we can. I've got plenty of notes left, plenty of modules. Love to have some interaction, love to be talking about your projects and working with things that you're going through. And obviously maybe we'll get you in line and for a creator meeting.